I still remember the first time I held Emma in my arms. She was barely 5 years old, her tiny hands clutching my shirt as she dozed off on my shoulder. I had married her mother, Rachel, knowing full well that Emma came as part of the package, and I never once saw her as anything less than my own. I wasn't a wealthy man, but I was an honest one. My job as a mechanic meant I came home with grease-stained hands and sore muscles, but I took pride in my work. I made sure Rachel and Emma never lacked anything. I paid for Emma's school trips, attended every parent-teacher conference, and was there for every scraped knee and nightmare. For years, we were happy. I thought we were a family. But everything changed when Emma became a teenager. At first, it was little things, eye rolls when I picked her up from school in my old pickup truck, hesitation when introducing me to her friends. Then it escalated. "You smell like oil," she once muttered, stepping away from my hug when I greeted her at the door. I laughed it off. "Hazard of the job, kiddo. Someone's gotta keep the world running, right?" She just shrugged and walked away. Rachel told me it was just a phase, that teenagers were embarrassed by their parents no matter what. I believed her. Until the comments got crueler. "You don't understand, okay? You're just a mechanic." "You wouldn't get it," Emma snapped one evening when I tried helping her with college applications. I swallowed the hurt and kept quiet. I had spent years working overtime to save up for her education. I might not have had a fancy degree, but I had made damn sure Emma had every opportunity one never did. Still, she never stopped looking down on me. And then, one day, I heard the words that shattered my heart. "I don't want him at my graduation," Emma told Rachel in the kitchen, her voice sharp. "It's embarrassing. People will see him in his cheap suit and think I come from that." I stepped into the room just as Rachel gasped. "Emma, he's your father's." "No, he's not," she hissed. "My real dad is coming. He's successful. He belongs there. Not him." My throat tightened. My real dad. Emma was talking about her biological father, Greg, the man who had abandoned her and Rachel when she was a baby. The man who had never paid a dime in child support, who had ignored her existence until she was old enough to be impressive. And just like that, I wasn't enough anymore. I turned and left before they could see the hurt on my face. If that was what Emma wanted, then so be it. She had made her choice. Graduation day arrived, but I wasn't there. I stayed home, fixing an old transmission in my shop, pretending like I didn't care. I told myself it was just another day, just another car that needed repairing. But deep down, I knew the truth. The girl I had raised, the one I had sacrificed for, had shut me out, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. Rachel had tried to change Emma's mind, but my stepdaughter had been firm. "It's my day. I don't want him there," she had said. So, instead of standing in the crowd, watching her walk across the stage and feeling that swell of pride, I sat in my shop with grease under my nails, swallowing down the pain. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Greg didn't show up. I stared at the screen for a long time before setting my phone down without replying. Of course, he hadn't shown up. I had seen this coming from miles away. Greg was the kind of man who loved making big promises, but never followed through. He had popped back into Emma's life only when she was old enough to be an accomplishment, something he could brag about. She had believed his words, convinced that he cared, that he was the father she had always wanted. But now, when it mattered most, he was nowhere to be found. I wondered how Emma felt, sitting there in her cap and gown, looking for a man who had never cared enough to stay. A few hours later, Rachel came home. Emma was with her, still in her graduation dress, her face red with frustration. She kicked off her heels at the door, her whole body tense with anger. "He promised he'd be there," she muttered. "He was supposed to take me out to celebrate afterward." Rachel crossed her arms. "And what did he say when you called him?" Emma scoffed. "He didn't answer. He sent a text saying something came up. Congrats, though. That's it." I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. Rachel didn't sugarcoat it. "Did you even consider how your stepfather felt when you refused to invite him?" Emma rolled her eyes. "This isn't about him." Rachel let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Oh, it absolutely is, Emma. The man who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who worked himself to the bone to give you opportunities. You threw him aside for a man who couldn't even bother to show up. And now you're mad. Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought maybe she would apologize. Maybe she would realize the weight of what she had done. But instead, she turned and stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. I sighed, shaking my head. Let her be, Rachel. She made her choice. Now she has to live with it. Rachel looked at me with sad eyes. You don't have to pretend you don't care. I swallowed hard and picked at my wrench. Who said I was pretending? I went back to work, focusing on fixing what was in front of me. But some things couldn't be fixed. And I wasn't sure if Emma and I ever would be. Emma went off to college, still acting distant toward me. She never called, never texted, never asked about me. And for the first time in years, I stopped trying. I had spent so long chasing after her love, only to be discarded when I was no longer convenient. So I let her go. Life moved on. I focused on my work, Rachel, and myself. If Emma wanted to believe Greg was the better father, then she could live with the consequences. But life has a funny way of teaching lessons. A year into college, Rachel got a call late at night. I was in bed when I heard the soft sound of her voice from the hallway. At first, I thought something terrible had happened, but when Rachel hung up, she just sighed and rubbed her temples. Emma? I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. Greg promised to pay her tuition. Told her not to worry about loans, that he had plenty of money. I felt my stomach twist. And Rachel let out a tired laugh. And, of course, when the deadline came, the money never arrived. Greg stopped answering her calls. He blocked her number, actually. I ran a hand over my face. Of course, he did. She's devastated, Rachel murmured. She actually believed him. Emma had spent years thinking Greg was the perfect father, the successful, well-off man who could give her a better life than a simple mechanic ever could. She had cut me out of her world for him. And now, she was finally realizing the truth: he never cared. Rachel managed to take out a loan to cover some of the costs, but Emma still had to pick up a part-time job to keep herself afloat. And that's when karma struck. One afternoon, Rachel came home from running errands, an amused smirk on her face. You won't believe where Emma's working, she said, setting down the groceries. I glanced up from the table. Where? A diner. As a waitress. I froze. Emma, the same girl who used to mock my grease-stained hands, who once said she was embarrassed to be seen with me because I was just a mechanic, was now working long hours, scraping plates, taking orders, and dealing with rude customers just to survive. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like a little bit of justice. Rachel sat down across from me. She's struggling, you know. She's realizing how tough it is out there. She's seeing what it means to work for something. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Good. Maybe she needs to learn that. Rachel hesitated. I think she's starting to regret what she did to you. I didn't say anything, because at that point, I wasn't sure if I cared anymore. Weeks passed before I heard from Emma again. I had come to terms with the idea that she might never apologize. Some lessons in life are learned the hard way, and I wasn't about to force her to see what had been in front of her all along. But then, one evening, as I was closing up the shop, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma. Hey, can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Sure. An hour later, Emma arrived at the shop. She looked different, not just physically, but in the way she carried herself. Gone was the arrogance, the unearned superiority. In its place was exhaustion, humility, and something else I couldn't quite name. She stood in the doorway, fidgeting. Hey, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. Didn't expect to see you here. She swallowed hard. I know. I waited, letting her gather her thoughts. She exhaled. I messed up. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. I was awful to you, she continued, shifting on her feet. I was stupid. I thought Greg was everything I wanted in a father. He made all these promises, made it sound like I was special to him. But the truth is, I was just something to boost his ego. And when it came time to actually be a dad, he disappeared. I nodded slowly, still not speaking. Emma's voice wavered. You, on the other hand, you were always there. Even when I didn't deserve it. Even when I treated you like garbage. I could hear the guilt in her voice, the weight of her realization settling in. She looked down. I know I can't take back what I said or did. But I just wanted you to know that I regret everything. And I'm so sorry. The words I had once longed to hear were finally spoken. But the truth was, I had stopped waiting for them a long time ago. I sighed, leaning against my workbench. Emma, I raised you because I loved you. Not because I expected gratitude. Not because I wanted to be repaid. But when you threw me away like I meant nothing, that hurt. She flinched, but she nodded. I know. I studied her for a moment. So, why now? Why come back? Tears welled up in her eyes. Because I miss my dad. And I finally realized that's you. For the first time in years, I saw the little girl who used to run into my arms, who used to call me daddy, who used to trust me to be there no matter what. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. Emma had learned her lesson. I let out a deep breath and finally pulled her into a hug. Welcome home, kiddo.